Yeah. So thanks for doing this. This is a guy in his room with narwhal or pear. I don't know which
Yeah,
I like.
either one. Maybe just narwhal, I guess. I'm kind of sticking to that.
And this is his new comic right here. Earthbound Grand Prix. I guess it's you said it's not really a sequel.
Yeah, it's like the next story. So it is, I guess it is a sequel, but you can read it independently. If you wanted to start the series here, you could. I've just been lettering it, and I'm like, yeah, there's like the moment where, characters meet up again, and it has more context if you've read the past, and you're like, oh, people like these two used to be friends, they're meeting again. But that's about it. Other than that, it's like all a new story.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I backed it and I didn't see the old one because you said that.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
So you're in Comicsgate. You're a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party Comicsgate, and I haven't actually read your stuff yet, but I did just get this, and I mean, mainly I thought it looked really cool, like and I thought about backing your other stuff too, so.
Cool. Yeah, definitely to all those things, and I appreciate you backing. It's like, was it the trailer? Did the trailer help or anything, or I don't know.
I don't know. I think, well, I heard about it, like, I heard about the reviews for the first one, and I did think that looked cool, but, like, it's one of those ones that I, like, didn't hear about at the time, so, yeah, like I said to you before, I haven't really, like, I've just been starting to get some of the Comicsgate comics, because, I discovered like Comicsgate from Ethan being on the Kurt Metzger podcast, which I guess is how Dale heard of it too. But I mostly was like, wow, this is a really cool movement. Like, and the way you guys talked about, what he talked about, like the woke infiltrating comics, and I was getting all into like getting really anti-woke myself, like at the time. So it was mostly the movement, and then I was like, I probably won't get comics because I haven't read comics since I was in like high school. But then I did eventually get some.
Nice. What was the first one you got? Probably Cyberfrog or something else.
I got some of Zach's, like, because it looked like, I guess, I was like, oh, this is cool, because I guess he's like this kind of the starter of Comicsgate, and I did get Cyberfrog later, because I wasn't, like, at first I was like, oh, Cyberfrog's cool, but I don't know if I would like it, but I got Cyberfrog because I thought the enemies were really cool looking. The
Vispiz or whatever?
Yeah.
Nice.
And, I like thought the whole Comicsgate movement is like so cool. Like, I wish that like more industries kind of did the same thing you guys are doing. I kind of feel like the mainstream's kind of dying anyway, but there's really nobody that's like, we're just gonna sell right to the fans, like, and you guys have no like self-censorship and all that.
Yeah, that's the thing I noticed, that I experienced the opposite end of even like, and even in theory, but like even in real life, in the town I live in, I'm like trying to network with other artists, and I immediately have to self-censor constantly, and you have to walk on a tightrope to maybe not offend them, and you're like, well, maybe they're cool, but meanwhile, like the thing that offends them is like, the littlest thing. It's not like whatever. So it's quite ridiculous. I'm like, oh, you know how refreshing it is to just like, if you feel like making a joke that's like could possibly offend someone, you can just say it and you don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I kind of like, well, I guess I haven't really been affected as much as, Ethan and people like that have been affected by woke people, but, I was like I've been doing amateur, like, stand-up, for some years, and, like, it got into the stand-up world, too, so... some of the stuff he said about people whisper networks and all this, like, stuff like that, I could definitely relate to just in an open mic scene.
Yeah, that's the worst because that makes you paranoid. And then they've already won. That got me super paranoid though with the comic industry when I was trying to break in. Right before Comicsgate, I was like, are they not hiring me because I'm like a white guy? And I was like, this can't be. And I was like, this goes against everything that I believe in. And then I like kept refusing to believe it. And I'm like, well, if I do believe it, then they can easily be like, hey, don't toot your own horn so much. You're not so special. Maybe you're just not getting in because you're not good enough. So leave us alone. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Yeah. But yeah. And even like in theory, like, so the other industries like animation and video games are kind of two big ones. Even filmmaking, they got the strikes going on. You're like, I know maybe they have their own little like really small networks where they can talk openly and freely. And there's a few, like I listened to Tarantino's podcast with Roger Avery, and they'll say kind of whatever they want. They don't have to censor themselves. And you can tell that they kind of, well, for one, they don't like modern movies. That alone, if you're like up and comer saying that, that's enough to get you like canceled or get the Whisper networks working against you kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. When was that you were submitting comics or whatever?
Yeah, it was a while ago now. It was like 2015, 2016. I would have been like 20, 28, 29. That was kind of the era because I was drawing all through my 20s, writing all through my 20s. Right around the time I was 27, 28, I kind of thought to myself, like, all right, I think I'm good enough to at least get like an entry job in comics now. And it still wasn't happening. And then like when I was 30, I did get one, and I had one kind of like it was a real job. It was on not for Marvel or DC. It was for a company called Dead Reckoning. They specialize in kind of niche publishing, but it's for for like military based books. And it was a medic who came back from Afghanistan. He had a big memoir, and a journalist was helping him turn it into a graphic novel. And that he's seen. Are you still there? Or? Guy in his room. I can possibly just continue the story, but I kind of want to wait until if a guy in his room gets back. I think his internet might have cut out. Oh, there you are. Yo.
Sorry, I hit back by accident on my browser.
Oh, nice. That's funny. You want me to continue that tale of that first job real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it was just that I had met the journalist at Tacoma Comic-Con called like Jet City Comic-Con, which years later would kick me out because I wouldn't get vaccinated. Like, so whatever.
Oh.
Just the Northwest is crazy. But I was tabling with the dude who just let me sit at extra at his table. So I was actually like behind a table, which helped a lot, showing some art. And the journalist took my card. He emailed me 2 weeks later because they did have an artist lined up, but that guy had to back out. So they were going to lose the book deal unless they could replace him really fast. So they were scrambling, and they're like, can you draw 120 pages in a year and color and letter? And I was like, yes, but I had never done that. And I did kind of scramble and figure it out. But that year working on that book kind of developed my style as it is today. It's that kind of fast digital style. A lot of that came from the circumstances of getting that job. And that working with them was a good experience, and they're cool. Although a little side note is that I think not the medic, I'm pretty sure, but the journalist and his boss is a guy named David Axe. They are super David Axe especially is super SJW, and he would later on get really into the side gig of being a journalist to scaremonger with COVID and to try and get people to take the jab. So he was like totally not meant to be friends with me, and we didn't like each other just through emails. But as I was getting, I mean, we didn't even know. But then as I was starting to get a little bit into Comicsgate a little more publicly, because after that job finished, I pitched them for an agent, which was my second Comicsgate book. And they sent me back and they said, hey, everyone here at the office loves it and we think it's really cool, but we're going to pass. And again, that's kind of like my paranoia coming up. I'm like, okay, so if you're not going to like kind of renew my contract, I'm not really getting fired, but the job's over and I had to get a job back at the Fred Meyer Deli after that. So then I'm slinging meat again. And I was like, okay, well, I got nothing to lose. I'm joining Comicsgate because I had been lurking, and this is kind of still real early Comicsgate, but I'd been lurking, but I hadn't jumped in publicly because I was a little bit worried about like, oh, will I hire, blah, blah, blah. So as soon as I start doing that, I'm drawing fan art of Cyberfrog and stuff like that. Then the journalist calls me and he's like, hey, I can't help but notice that you've been hanging around with Comicsgate. I just want you to know that they're like a hate group and you probably shouldn't be doing that. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, they seem fine to me. I don't know what to tell you. And he's like, okay, you do what you got to do kind of thing. And then he hung up, and I never talked to him again in my life. I never talked to any of them again. And that was the end of that. But then Comicsgate was rolling, and then Ethan kind of swooped me up pretty quickly after that because I drew this Cyberfrog fan art. And I had Earthbound going, which Earthbound had a crowdfunding a year before for the initial floppy of part 1. And it had almost failed, like, because that was pre-Comicsgate, so it had raised like $1,700 total, and I'd fulfilled it, and I'd sold it to some early Comicsgate people. I actually got retweeted by, what's his name, Captain, who was like the other guy besides your boy Zach in the very beginning. It was Captain somebody, if anyone knows.
I don't know.
And he's like a nice enough guy, but he got real kind of jealous of your boy Zach and Ethan once because he was first. That's like a weird classic kind of business thing of being first is a huge advantage, but it's not as much as you'd think, because still someone will come along who's better. It's like you got to be the first and the best, and then you're going to be. That's kind of like what Ethan, he really hit and your boy Zach kind of hit the nail on the head or whatever, hit the zeitgeist, and this other guy hadn't. But he had tweeted out at the time, he's like, hey, this guy's like us, he doesn't like modern comics either, and he has his own comic, we should support him. And so, but him doing that got me like 1 or 0 sales. So that just goes to show you at the time it just wasn't there, the networking infrastructure to support indie artists, to kind of like that retweets, and even on Twitter, that you could like become a little mini entrepreneur with your own book. It wasn't really there yet, but a year later it was. So
yeah, that's good. By the way, this is my friend. Do you remember what's that one Marvel guy that his wife divorced him, but he used to he called Ethan, remember, and he got all flustered.
Yeah, Donnie Cates.
Yeah. He said that was one of his tweets, let's do this, Italy, and he would
yeah, because one of the people were laughing about like there was an Italian artist who his wife seemed to be responding to more than him. I don't know in the lore if he actually got divorced. But I don't know the full story. Now I want to look into it. Like, how did that end up? But
yeah, I forgot to check his Twitter to see, but I thought Ethan said like, yeah, one like New Year's, like recently, he was like, well, lost everything this year. Just thinking about like a really depressing tweet like that or something.
Oh wow!
But I showed my friend who doesn't even know Comicsgate, but it was just so funny because he just would always respond to his haters or whatever, and he'd be like, I gotta go. I'm making my wife coffee.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah. That is funny. I know. It's weird when you're kind of cucked out like that. There's a ceiling on even how good your stories can be. Like Donny Cates, he's actually like not a bad writer. And like your boy Zach puts it best. He says like he's actually not really bad at all, and he does have talent. But if you put him in the '80s with all the actual good writers, he would kind of be at the bottom pretty much. And then today he's like one of the only writers, because he's surrounded by diversity hires who you can barely even count them writers. So he's actually a little bit higher up in Marvel. Yeah. But it's still like there's nothing you can do if you're kind of like whole outlook on life is a little like skewed and weird and wonky. You can't even like use that as a jumping off point as a worldview to be able to tell like realistic stories or whatever with like relatable human emotion, stuff like that. Yeah, you know, one other like old school story about Earthbound is, again, before Comicsgate. So Earthbound had the crowdfund. So I'd finished the first floppy. I put it up for free on Facebook. This is like 2015, I think it was 2015, maybe 2016, but real early. And then it was, the editor's name is David Desanayaki, and don't nobody contact him or anything. It's not a big deal or anything, but he was nice at first, and then he ghosted me. But on Facebook, he reached out and he goes, "Hey, I just read that comic you posted, Earthbound. It's fantastic. Would you ever consider publishing it in print?" And he at the time worked for my favorite company at the time, and they're called something press, but I can't even think of it right now. It's Magnetic Press, and they specialized in bringing over European books to America. Kind of niche again, but I loved a lot of the European artists, and that's how I discovered Bengal. And he nowadays I think he just draws for Marvel, but back then he was doing European comics, and Magnetic Press was bringing his books over. So I sent the script to David Desanayaki, and we were emailing back and forth for about 2 weeks, and then he ghosted me, and I just didn't even know. So I was like, again, the paranoia kind of seeps up. And I was also annoyed. I'm like, dude, first off too, like you're talking about my first comic gig, about my kind of dream of making it in the industry, where I hadn't been able to do that for 10 years. And I'm, you know, then the chance, I'm like, is this really happening? I can't believe it. I'm actually making something that someone's responding to and they actually like, and it might get published. And then he ghosts me. I'm like, it's like the really bad way to treat up and coming artists.
And you were like, were you on Comicsgate streams or anything then? No,
it was even way before all of that. Oh. But it was when the woke stuff was all happening. And I found out just a little bit later, because he had moved to Oni Press, and they were really bad with the woke stuff right away, about being very open about, I think they had on their like hiring, you know, if you're going to apply to us, it almost has a message that said, I wish I could find it. I might have saved it at some point. Now it's like lost to time, but it's this JPEG on their website, and it says like, for too long, stories have centered around a certain viewpoint from a certain type of person. Now here at Oni Press, we will expand multiple viewpoints from other people and not the old way, something like that. And it's like, okay, yeah, they are not going to hire any white dudes. And when I did like confront, although not in a mean way, I basically met David Desanayaki at like Seattle Comic-Con, what's it called, Emerald City. He was at a different company then, but I kind of went up, introduced myself. He immediately got huge deer in the headlights, and I'm like, no, I'm not like disgruntled dude. I'm not like gonna assassinate you or anything. But I was like, I was trying to give peaceful energy. I'm like, don't be frightened, David Desanayaki. I just want to ask you why you ghosted me. And even that, I said it in a nice way. I was like, I didn't end up hearing back from you. What happened? Whatever. I don't know. And he goes, oh yeah, about that, man. You know how it is. Sorry. You know, I got hired at a new company, and you know, that's what he said. So.
Oh yeah, 2016 is when everything got, I just felt like just the environment got uncomfortable.
Yeah, you could feel it in the air. And it was, yeah, like multiple close friends. I lost a handful, and you realize they're not super close when you look back on it. You're like, oh, okay, who cares?
Yeah.
But it's like, damn, like relationships getting destroyed just from that. And 2020 was bad, but not as bad. And I'm wondering how 2024 will go. I kind of hope people are just getting more and more desensitized, but you never know.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, no. Well, 2020 also was just like COVID and.
Yeah, that was its own thing that was similar, where relationships are destroyed over that
Yeah,
shit.
I mean, yeah, I had another guest on that he lost friends too. He lost one just because he said he wasn't voting in 2016. Not even that he was voting for Trump, just.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of sad, kind of crazy. You worry a little bit about those people. They got to be pretty like extreme to do that. But
Yeah, I mean, like, even like, because I was just doing stand up in Philadelphia, like back, I guess around 2016, and I remember somebody just posted like she was like, I think everybody should start booking based on this spreadsheet, and it was a spreadsheet of like, you know, different identities to book based on, like, and these are just local comedy shows, like.
yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. How do they have to have like serious, it makes me feel like they don't have self-awareness, but then maybe they do, maybe they're just, you know, on some level it's like they're just commies. Like who cares? Whatever they are. I don't know. They're like different, but
I mean, that was the thing. She really was just a normal. Her comedy was pretty, like, it was really surprising from her because she wasn't somebody I expected to be like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the other thing about 2016, because I can relate to that a little bit because I have some of my most sane, they're liberal, but they're not crazy friends. Even they, in 2016, they were crazy, and they've kind of since calmed down. But it's like, oh, they were getting worked up because it was kind of the first time. And so a lot of people misidentified it. They kind of just fell for all the bullshit. They're like, oh, Trump is a Nazi, and it will be like crazy if he wins. And you're like, it will not. You need to stop getting brainwashed or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I miss a little bit is the good economy. I feel like we're all feeling that a little bit because even in indie comics, like everyone's numbers are down just a little bit, and but down like 10, 20, 25% even. And I'm like, that's like what inflation is. It's like,
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I heard you say that the other day. Like, I was thinking like how annoying it is to, if you go Biden's economy, people go, oh, he's a Trumper.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever used to be like that with any other like Clinton. You could do that with, like, Bill Clinton when he was in office, and nobody would be like, oh, you're a right-wing Nazi. Like, it was just like you criticize a president.
Yeah.
Now it's like, now that I guess they just ignore stuff, or I guess they've just been lying. They go, oh, inflation is down, even though it's not.
Yeah. 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 Like, yeah, or if you tell them, like, if you don't like this economy, you can just vote for the other guy. And they're like, I'm never going to do that. I'd rather go hungry.
Yeah, like, but like, yeah, Comicsgate has guys like you where I feel like in a sane time, like you'd be on like a bigger, like a mainstream type of label, and you'd just be doing your thing. But now it's like, it's also funny that you got a call, like someone that's how things are now. They're like, hey, by the way, Comicsgate is a hate group. Like, they tell you it.
Yeah.
You've been involved in it. You heard what people are saying, but they have to tell you, oh, they're secretly a hate group. They don't ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Rini went through all that too. Like, it's kind of happens to anyone. If you're making that transfer, it's like crabs in a bucket or whatever. They'll all call you, they don't want to lose someone from their team. And a lot of people, that's why I like Comicsgate too, because these are the people that we've all heard that, but we're the ones that once you hear it, we want to like double check.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we double check, we realize it's bullshit. And then we kind of from there you kind of know what's what a little bit.
Yeah, that's like something I used to hear years ago, like, oh, Jordan Peterson's a Nazi. And I asked someone, what? What do you mean, why? And they're like, I don't know, just what people say.
Yeah. Yeah, he was ahead of his time with the gender thing. What's a little funny about that too is like people were laughing about it in 2016. Like people would tell a joke, they'd be like, like there's all these huge issues, and what we're actually just arguing about is what gender goes into what bathroom. I can't believe it, like something like that. And I'm like, yeah, at the time that sort of made sense, but now it's like, no, that is the main issue, and it is very important.
Yeah, I mean, that came up really fast, the gender. Well, as soon as like Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, it came in like phases. There is that. Did you follow Owen Benjamin getting like kicked out or whatever of Hollywood?
No, I just like I don't really understand his whole thing. Like, again, he's another guy. People just go, he's a Nazi. I heard people say, oh, he went nuts because he had strong weed once on podcast. And I'm like, how would that make you completely change your life, though? Just like, oh, I had a weed that was strong.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a meme or whatever. But he got canceled back in the days when canceling was still kind of scary. And it was kind of like a true, real canceling. Like his agent called him up and told him he couldn't represent him anymore. Like his like lawyer, whatever, said he couldn't represent him anymore. And this is like he was plugged into the Hollywood system, like straight up. He'd been in like Adam Sandler movies and shit, and he was kind of going up that, like he'd probably lead a movie at some point. But yeah, they just kicked him out. And the reason they kicked him out is because of a tweet he did I don't know if this was like 2016, it was around then, maybe 2017, but Hollywood was doing the weird, I think they pat themselves on the back for being ahead of the times, trendsetters, and the only way they can do that is just by being super progressive and pushing crazy shit early. So they were pushing the trans kid shit before it was mainstream, and there was a guy posting that his kid was like, a girl now, even though it was a boy, and they're gonna start putting him on like hormones or whatever, and I still can't believe that that's acceptable at all, but it's crazy. But so Owen Benjamin says like this is child abuse, which is true, and that was it. So from that point on, I think he got some chances to back down, but he didn't back down. But I think they might have canceled him anyway, even if he did. But then he got like super canceled. From that, he did spiral a bit, went down every rabbit hole. Then he kind of balanced out for the most part. He ended up getting banned off everything. So it's kind of a bummer because banning sort of works, because I was kind of watching him when he was on YouTube. Now I think he is on Rumble. So I'll remember like once every 6 months and watch one of his streams. But yeah, he was just a high profile example, one that was happening kind of early. Real quick, Mega Michael says, what is your favorite all-time comic? It's a good question. One thing is like, I've been getting more and more into just indie comics, and those are like my all-time favorites now. I like them more than mainstream, like just straight up. But mainstream, some of the best mainstream still might like hold a pretty special spot in my heart. And it's Frank Miller Daredevil. So it's like Frank Miller's Daredevil, Born Again, and Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, which I think those are like 10 years apart. He kind of went back to Daredevil just for a graphic novel in the early 90s. That's The Man Without Fear, and it's drawn by J.R. And then Born Again, which they're turning that into a Netflix series next. It'll come out like next year, and people are nervous that that's going to get like wokeified or whatever. But that comic is amazing. And that's Dave Mazzucchelli or something is the artist. He's awesome too, but I'm not too familiar other than I really like the art in it. But yeah, Frank Miller, I read it relatively late in the game too, because when I got into comics, I was reading like just stuff that you might hear are classics. So I was catching up. So I read like The Dark Knight Returns, I read Watchmen, I read Mouse. Some of those are like college, like if you take a college class on graphic novels, they make you read those or whatever. And then got into Tim Sale and read as an artist. So I read all of his books that he had done art on. But then getting into like way late in the game, picking up Daredevil, I was like, this is like reminds me that comics can be better than movies and TV and kind of different, and like the comics medium being just when it's firing on all cylinders, it can be the best of all of them, and it's so good. Oh, and Berserk, which isn't really comics, but that's life-changingly good. That cheats because it's this long. So, and it actually is like this long if you want to keep reading it. But the golden arc that everyone talks about, it's like this long. So yeah, it's like, of course, I mean, not of course, but that with that many pages, you can build up stuff really good and get huge emotional responses, and it is awesome. Yeah.
Well, I think that's my friend, and he, like I was telling him about some of this comic stuff now, and he's like, that sucks, because like, he has a kid, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I tell him not to read any new comics. I'm like, yeah, I haven't. What would you, do you recommend anything like that, to just not show a kid new comics?
Oh, yeah. I don't do that for movies, really. With like a few exceptions, like I might go see Oppenheimer or something, but I don't really watch new movies, and I don't really watch new TV, and I do watch old movies and TV, and I do have like this kind of fantasy. Like if I had a kid, and the reality is it's so hard, and kids have their own device, their own aims and free will. So I don't even know how you handle it, but I would want to raise the kid like a time machine. So when they're 3, they're watching like 1930s movies. When they're 4, they're watching 1940s movies. When they're 5, they're watching 1950s movies. So they can like appreciate and hopefully not get the modern like OCD where you can't even watch old movies now if your brain gets wrecked by TikTok kind of. And the old movies are better though in so many ways, but you have to preserve a little bit of that like older school brain kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I never watched any really old stuff, even as a kid. Like, my dad just liked the same Star Wars, like a lot of sci-fi. Like, I watched the same movies over and over.
Yeah.
I did like them, but yeah, now I'm starting to go like, oh, maybe I should watch old stuff.
Yeah, well, you're like, my generation-ish. You might be a little younger than me, but we dodged a bullet a little bit with some of the movies because they were still pretty good and cool even when we were kids. If you're watching modern movies, if you're a 90s kid or whatever, that was still good stuff, and you can still kind of, with that base, you can still go back and enjoy older movies.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just turned 40, so I'm like at the almost not a millennial, but
yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm 37, so yeah, and just one more thing about favorite comics. So in the indies, there's one in particular that I always think of, and it's Disintegration Street by Brendan Swan. And it's a little bit of a weird one too, because like it's not mainstream. The art is, I love the art, but it's like, it's a little bit like you'd almost look at it and be like, wait, is this like indie, like it's not good enough to be mainstream, or is it just that's the style and I got to get down with it? Yeah. And I think it's part B, but it is like, it just takes a little bit of like, okay, this is what it is. You got to get, so some people won't read it just because they don't like the art, but which is fair enough, if that's, comics are a visual medium. But I do like the art, and I love that comic. And it's another one, it's kind of long, which is always fun for me. I like a little bit longer comics usually. And it's just called Disintegration Street. But when I got Earthbound 2 for me, was that hit when the economy was still pretty good, and that one, it was like for me that was like a hit, like a smash hit, like it did 1,200 sales, and that's backers. I think books, it was like maybe up over 2,000 because people were getting multiple books and stuff. And so with that was like enough to buy rent, pay food. Pay rent and buy food. But then I had like a fair amount, pay taxes, and I had like a little nest egg after that. So I started investing back into comics, and of that, so one of the people I've hit up is Brendan. So I'm trying to collaborate with him. We might have a collaboration coming out sooner or later.
Yeah. So so you seem is your favorite stuff like I don't like more like surreal type of. I know you're like David Lynch a lot. Is that your favorite type of stuff, or do you like also mainstream type of, or I mean more straight ahead?
Yeah, good question. I think I like everything and I like straight ahead stuff, but then some of the straight ahead stuff, like I know some people love it and I kind of just like it. Like even like I don't love it, but I do just like it. But when I was a kid, I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
but like, yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. Like Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, I'm like, yeah, they're okay. I don't like love them, but they're okay. But David Lynch, I do like him a lot. He's probably maybe my favorite director. But of him, I like his less surreal stuff, which there isn't that much of it. But like Blue Velvet is his least surreal movie, even though it's pretty darn weird. But it's awesome. I love that movie. It's very inspirational too. That movie is cool because pretty simple-ish like plot and like stuff that happens, and they build up so much intense suspense with just a little bit. And so I really that's something I kind of try to do with my comics too.
yeah, yeah. Well, I've heard you. It seems like you're into like studying storytelling, and like I always like. I guess you got me to think maybe that's a good idea because I always used to be like, I hate studying anything like that. Like I hated music theory because it just seemed like there's no way the people that make them, even Mozart, well maybe Mozart, I don't know, but like who sits and goes, I'm gonna put this chord next, and like the way
Yeah.
that I was like, so like I don't know if, because I always would think like, oh, David Lynch like doesn't analyze stuff like the way people analyze his movies, but maybe he does. I don't know. Like it's hard to.
Yeah, good question. I think he would have been aware, at least in the case of Blue Velvet, that his goal is to make it real intense, and then he kind of knows how to do that. And specifically, if anyone hasn't seen the movie, this isn't spoilers, but it's the guy, he sneaks into a woman's apartment, kind of pretending to be a bug sprayer, and then while he's there, she kind of starts acting a little bit weird. And then her boyfriend comes home and she makes him hide because she's like, the boyfriend will kill you if he sees you, which is actually, that's like a structure from fairy tales. That's like the ogre, Jack the Giant Slayer, all those stories go like that. Like, dude enters castle, sees the princess, she says, you got to hide because the ogre's going to be home any second. So then you hide. But then, so there's a point where he's hiding and like this shit's going on that's kind of super crazy that he has to kind of just watch. And like, I'm like, man, that's so crazy that that's in a movie. Like that was when I saw it in college for the first time, and I was like, that's kind of was my thought. Like, I can't believe this shit's in a movie. But it's not like it's super bloody, super gory. There is weird shit about it. Like the guy, it's what's his name? He's a famous actor, Dennis Hopper, and he has a oxygen mask that gives him laughing gas to get him high, and then he makes her call him daddy, and he like hits her, and he says, "Don't look at me," and he's like, I don't know, that kind of shit is weird, you know. But
did you actually? My dad was really into his Dune movie, and so I watched that a ton as a kid, and I didn't know that people didn't like it until.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I like it, but I can't like sit down and watch it like a classic over and over again. I think I've seen it twice now, and because it's a little long, I get sort of bored by the end. But there's some stuff I love. Like I love that he does the thinking people's thoughts. He does it as whispers. That's like genius, and I don't know if anyone else does that ever. It's like a really good idea to have that thoughts would be whispers and they wouldn't be like just speaking or whatever.
Yeah, I found like an extended, people added and remastered his extra scenes and on YouTube, and it's like a lot better because it just flows better and everything. But I I do really like the weirdness of his one, because the newer one, they just don't have like they didn't make the Harkonnens this weird, all those like cool. I would like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it has like puppets and stuff. The David Lynch one, I'm like, that's awesome. And yeah, the new one, I was not the biggest fan of, but I'd still give it a chance. And I like that director, and things about it are cool. But it's like we'll see where it goes, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you said before something like you're more into movies than shows.
Yeah. Yep.
I was like, yeah, that's a good point. Like, for a while, I almost was starting to think shows are better because they're more like, you can tell more, like, more story, I guess, or like whatever. But a lot of the parts of shows, I'm like, all right, this part of. But
Yeah. It's like, what do they do with that extra time? Usually they like waste it. And if you watch a good movie, it can be so perfect and fun. And for studying storytelling, it's probably better to study movies. And you might see with shows too, like it'll be the one episode that everyone talks about, and sure enough, it's like insane, kind of on a mission to handle some shit, and that will be like what people like about it. Like the original Star Trek was like that too. Like some of the best episodes, you're like, oh, they knew they had something on this episode.
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, are you more into like telling a story than the like drawing part?
A little bit. I do like drawing a lot, and I kind of got into that before I was into writing. Then I've kind of gotten a little more into writing, and then now my kind of thing is it's not necessarily even about drawing or writing, but I'm kind of, because I've been doing the comics thing for a while now, is I want to break into some other stuff like animation, video games, and live action movies. And I got some schemes to do that, but it's still a little bit like one of the first things that's crazy about movies is like you really do like need to have social skills and a social network and friends or have some money or whatever. But I got one script that's super minimalist, and I'm like, I think I can maybe just cast it and it'll either be me and a sound person just doing it, or I might be able to just put the cameras on tripods and I can be the sound person. I was like, I almost want to do that as a challenge. And the thing about that is that will potentially not even be watchable. Like if I'm lucky, it will be watchable, but there's no way it's going to be like getting me gigs at Netflix or anything, because it's just two people talking. But it was actually fun to write. It's like kind of like writing a play or whatever. You got to keep things moving and keep things within, even though it's just two people talking, it has to be still a little something going on.
Yeah, you like got into animation and stuff, and that trailer, I mean, to me, it's like just much work. I mean, well, I don't know. It's a little harder to do the 3D animation, but
Yeah.
done like 2D before, or did you just randomly get into?
Oh yeah, I kind of got in trying to learn 3D as I go, sort of through the comic thing too, because I'll build environments in 3D and use those in the comic. And I did that for the Foreign Agent comic. I did that for this comic Grand Prix. And I do like that workflow because it makes you like more like a filmmaker within the comic. You're like in the 3D program, picking your camera angles. I was learning about lenses, even though it's 3D, all that stuff still applies. And like lenses are crazy because it's actually perspective is what lenses are. And in high school, I realized they don't even teach you like perspective really. They go like put a dot on the horizon line and draw lines to it, but like you can do that and it will look terrible. There's stuff you have to do outside of that, and then it will make it look good. But and that all has to do with the quote unquote angle of the lens. It took me forever to figure that out. But yeah, so learning 3D, and then 2D, I'm kind of messing with that. It'd be nice to do both one day. I don't know. I kind of lean towards 3D because I like the workflow. I like that it goes a little bit faster.
Did you do that for your background? Because some of the backgrounds look
Yeah, for Earthbound 1, it's almost all drawn 2D, even the backgrounds. For Earthbound Grand Prix, there are a couple pages that have 3D background, which was like a really early test. And I noticed too, like people either didn't notice or they said they liked those pages the most. So it's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And that was before, because sometimes there'll be a little reaction against it too, because for one, the characters and the background will stand off from each other. So it'll be like a collage. Like 2D animation is like that. Usually you have the background painted and the characters are cell animations, so they look different. And it's this collage feel and they stand out deliberately. And I personally like it a lot. But some people, they might not like that, or just the fact it's like more digital or whatever.
So were you like in CG like when it started, or did you?
Yeah, I was there at the beginning. I think because even before Ethan, it was your boy Zach, and Ethan was watching your boy Zach. We were all just watching him, and his channel was exploding. Then Ethan got like kind of like fired or whatever, and then he launched Cyberfrog. But that whole period, it wasn't that fast. That whole period was like 2 years, but it was like a year of your boy Zach exploding. Ethan is getting run out of the industry. Ethan started his YouTube channel, started talking Star Wars for a year to get his subscribers really high. And he got eventually higher than your boy Zach from talking about Star Wars. And the Fandom Menace, that was kind of that thing. Then he launched Cyberfrog and it did amazingly well. And I think it kind of broke all the records. It did better than, because Jawbreakers did really good too. But that was the first. You know, your boy Zach, Malin, and Brett R. Smith, the colorist, they launched Jawbreakers and then Cyberfrog. But I don't know the timing if they were just a few months apart or if they're a year apart. I kind of forget. But what I remember is that your boy Zach, like I think I hopped on and he was at 2,000 subscribers, but he was getting like 1,000 a day and then like 5,000 a day, and it just was like exploding. And I remember I seen one of his videos. And I'm sure it felt like this to a lot of people at the time, like, because he was really, the timing was like perfect for him to be, he kind of had this reputation, even at the time, it was like his own personal identity with the channel is to be the guy that will talk about the elephant in the room when no one else will talk about it. Or the other, like, you know, fairy tale that people talk about is the Emperor's New Clothes. Like he was the one guy saying it. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, God damn, you're right, man. I've been self-censoring my own thoughts because I won't even go there because I'm scared of being called racist or whatever. And so you just hear him doing it. I went back, watched every video, and I'm like, oh my God, like the comics industry is in shambles. Books are terrible. Nobody's hiring anyone. This partially explains my paranoia might be somewhat true or whatever about not being able to break into the industry. And then the other kind of interesting story about that that's kind of fun is way early in his channel, I like got his emailed him, and I said, hey, based on what you've been saying, I think you might like my comic because I know you hate modern comics. And then he responded and said, I clicked a link, but it didn't work for me. And I was like, oh, try this one. And then he never responded. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, it's not like that I was hanging, that was my one chance. I didn't really care. And so then I just keep watching his channel. He doesn't know who I am, you know, nobody. But then he saw some of my art on Twitter, and then he said, I find this art style compelling. And my art at the time, even now, is like this a little bit, but it was kind of splitting people to the point where it would actually get like haters. People would be like, I hate this art. And then that would get other people defending it. They're like, what are you talking about? It's amazing. And I was like, hey, this all benefits me. People talking about it. I'm okay with that. But he was one of the guys who liked my art. So then I reached out again, and we were just talking about a little bit about that. And I was like, you know, I'll work with you if you ever want to work on something. And he's like, yeah, maybe. What's your page rate and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know, this, whatever works. And he's like, yeah, I just don't have anything right now, kind of. And he did say at one point, he's like, you know what, the Jawbreaker style is doing way better. If I try to do indie stuff, it doesn't do quite as well. so I'll probably stick with the mainstream art styles. I was like, okay. So again, we don't talk again for like a couple years, still in the same circles ish, kind of obviously friendly. I'm watching his channel. Then because he liked my art though, he backed Earthbound. So then he got Earthbound, and then this is kind of part of my lore, part of the interesting like checkpoint or whatever is he gave a review. Kind of to me, it was randomly. I didn't know. People were like, Zach's reviewing Earthbound, so he reviews it. He gave it a pretty insanely positive review, and he loved it basically. And I was like, dude, I tried to share this book with you way back in the day. But you know what's funny is, if he just like human psychology, and Zach like this maybe more than other people, like he kind of likes that feeling of if you discover it yourself, that's like a bonus, you know?
Yeah.
So like if he would have actually just read it at the time when I emailed it to him, he probably would have been like, oh yeah, it's pretty good, and like moved on. But because he kind of was the one who made the decision to back it, it's like Inception, you know? It was his idea. He decided to back it. He decided to read it. To him, it felt like a discovery. And he's like, shit, this is like the best crowdfunded book I've read so far. And so then because he said that on his channel at its peak almost, my book sold out overnight. And
Oh, wow.
and I literally quit the Fred Meyer Deli the next day. So then from then on, I was like a professional comics guy. So then I kind of had made it in the industry after that point. But what's funny is like, if you're like giving advice to younger artists or whatever, it's like, for me, it is just the way it works. But the two times that my career has really leveled up, it's been from a bigger person helping me out. And so knowing that, it's like, but you can't go around needy and like clingy and bugging bigger people all the time. You just can't. But you got to know and hope that does happen. Make it a possibility for that to happen. And it's funny because in kind of both cases too, I wasn't being needy or clingy. Like one is I drew fan art of Ethan and he happened to find it. Someone else gave it to him. So then he had me on the show. Like if I had been like, Ethan, here's some fan art. Can I please come on your show? He'd be like, I don't know about that. Let me think about it.
Yeah.
But,
Didn't the Preston guy do that? Kept sending him comics over and over again.
Yeah. Just, you can't be needy, and you gotta be, they call it abundance versus scarcity. You gotta like have faith that, you know, like I'm doing my own thing and it's going to work for me. If these people can help me, all the better. And it's got to be their choice, and they want to help me for their own reasons. It could be beneficial to us both. You know, Bancroft is like that. Like he's very open about like no deals. Like look, we're both helping each other because we both like it. We both want to do it. No quid pro quo, because that's when it gets sketchy about expectations and if they're met or not, and then sore feelings and stuff like that. So it's kind of definitely a good like rule of thumb to get started. But yeah, I guess I got kind of lucky in that way. So then I email your boy Zach again at like the third time we've interacted. And I was like, because he said he loved my book. I was like, well, you know, we talked years ago about maybe working together. I'd still be down if you ever wanted to. And then he's like, absolutely, we got to do it. So then from then, that was Narzak kind of started from that. And then we actually did start putting books out.
Yeah, that's great. Like, like when, I mean, I'm not a professional comedian, but like in the amateur whatever scene, like in Philly, they would always, a lot of guys would be like, hey, don't ever ask to be on a show. Don't ever ask anything. And I'm like, I just don't really think, never, like you shouldn't. I don't know, everything's black and white all the time with people like, oh, don't ever. I'm like, I don't think anything should be like that, like a hard rule but like with the comedy stuff, it was quid pro quo. Everything was like, all right, you booked me, or all right, like if you say you have a show and then you book someone, then they'll book you. That's basically how it worked. So
yeah, I mean, and streams are a little bit like that, of like just hopping on each other's streams, just basic networking. Shoot, I was gonna say one thing about that, well, kind of what you're talking about that it reminded me of, but I kind of forgot. If I think of it, I'll tell you.
Yeah, because like, well, yeah, once I heard a guy, this one comic was like, yeah, do you think like, I don't know, he named the feminist community. He, was like, he never asks anything. Like no one ever asks anything. He's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna wait. And
Yeah. No, yeah. It's almost like sabotage. That advice is like competitive sabotage. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
one thing is this is what I was gonna say. I volunteered at when I lived in Seattle at like a sort of like a boys and girls kind of club thing, and I'd help with some of the art aspects with kids, and I noticed I only did like a couple events, but they're both pretty fun and working with kids, drawing with them and stuff. But one of them I noticed, I was like, damn, like the kids that are outgoing, they're like, Mister, come here. And they're like asking me questions and asking me favors, asking me to doodle for them so they know how to do it. And then the shy kids are doing nothing. And I was like, I feel so sorry for the shy kids. They might even be more talented, but these kids that are not shy, they're getting all the advantages. And I'm like, even if I try to balance it, so I'm like, okay, I can help you, but I have to also check and make sure they want something. But it's like, even with that, it's skewed like so much advantage for the kids who aren't shy. And I was like, note to self, like not being shy is such a huge advantage. And I guess you could put that in some of what we're talking to is like, I've heard this advice that I think is kind of okay. It's like shoot your shot for a lot of stuff. Like if you're in indie comics, if you want a Dale Keown cover, you can ask him. I don't think he would be that offended. He'd probably say no. But you could still ask, and it's not that big a deal.
And you have to be able to afford it too.
Yeah, you probably want to figure that out before you even ask or whatever. But kind of same with Malin, all those guys, and asking even like to do an interview, you asking me, or I've done that to people too, asking them that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not outgoing network type of guy either, but the way you got noticed would be like my ideal would be that what you described, Zach, noticing you just reached out once, like you didn't,
Yeah, like of their own free accord, people passing it on. I know, like that's like I wish that there was more infrastructure to help up and coming artists and discover like the ones that have more promise or more whatever what's it called potential, or even potential that's already been realized. So like they're ready, they're talented people. Then how do you get them kind of raising up the ladder? Because if you look from afar, maybe you only see the things that stand out and it can give you a bias, but it feels like it's like inverted where it's like, they put on the fast track like the girl in the wheelchair or whatever with one arm will get like the Marvel gig, and it's her first gig. She didn't like learn anything from working in the indies first and then get Marvel how it used to be or whatever. It's like they cut straight to the front of the line, and I'm like, well, that's kind of replacing the system. So now it's not even like the system where you used to be like, oh, you can work in the indies and then you work up. Like Mark Millar did that, like he worked in the indies for like 10 years and then he worked at Marvel and DC for 10 years. Then he like kind of became pretty famous with the Mark Millar that we all know. He started to get like movie deals and stuff 20 years in, and yeah, like that seems like that's sort of gone. Like, I don't even know what the system is now, but even on my end, I can do like a smaller version of it, but like I'll pimp Brendan Swan and I'll try and work with him. But even then it's like, there's no guarantees, and that's sort of like, my own tastes. It's not like I said, that's not necessarily super mainstream, even it just happens to be my favorite. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like every mainstream thing, it's kind of like meritocracy is gone, except for Comicsgate. It's like, okay, there you can have just talent. And then one annoying thing, like you were talking about Quentin Tarantino earlier, that's one annoying thing. They'll be like, oh, white people can't make it? What about Quentin Tarantino?
Yeah.
It's like, he's already established. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in comics, that's a thing where, like they'll say like, what about, Donnie Cates. I think he might be white, or maybe he'll now claim he's like an eighth Mexican or something and use that as an identity. And then he might say he's they, them. He plays all the game, but he was kind of like a white guy who got in right before the doors closed. He's like my age-ish or a little older maybe. And then the doors close, and then he'll pretend like there's no doors, or even people a little bit older than him. Like there's one guy, he gets like Netflix deals and he's very successful, and he's not a terrible writer even, but he did the Netflix show. Oh, I can't think of any of the things. I can picture it though, but it's about the boy with horns, and it's called Sweet Tooth. Jeff Lemire is his name. So he lives in Portland, I know too. He's like part of the Portland comic scene. He might be like a little older now, even he's like 50 or 60, but he completely threw Comicsgate under the bus. And I'm like, man, you benefited from the meritocratic system, and now that it's switching, you're totally burning the bridges behind you. One of the things that's stopping too is like, if he wasn't a coward, like him and I could have been friends in another universe where the crazy woke stuff didn't happen. Like you're saying, like it is, some of it does, you got to like not let it bother you, but it's like, yeah. Oh, another example is even Doug TenNapel, who I don't really actually have that much of a problem with. He gets some shit around here, but I kind of think he's okay. I even kind of like him, but I feel like if I was in his era or shoes, I think I would have been able to do what he did or better. But like the times have changed so much harder that it's like struggle to even make a dent or reach a bigger audience or whatever.
Plus
and so
too, it's like 3 strikes.
Yeah. And like that wasn't a super negative thing when he in the 90s. And then now all of a sudden it did become it. And it hurt him too. But it's like, oh, he was in that, just basically in that system where you can be a good artist, you can just get a job and be creative and good at your job and all of a sudden you're running a game or whatever, making a game, and then the game's famous. But at the same time, it's like a curse, but it's like there are ways where it's like a blessing. Like because the past's been a little bit harder, I do think that's like, you get an extra chip on your shoulder, and that totally helps for art and motivation and creation. And I don't know, I don't know if this is true, but I hope, like Frank, like some of these artists, they kind of get comfortable, and then their shit isn't quite as good. But when they're like really chomping at the bit early, their stuff is really classic and amazing. And I'm like, I might be in a permanent state of that early stage because I never get what I want, like, which is funny.
Yeah, that happens with bands too. It's like, oh, we're going back to our roots now, meaning they make it better like they used to, like.
Yeah, that's funny.
What about, is Frank Miller still alive, or is he?
Yeah, he people, you might put him in that boat too, where he did stuff that pretty much is the best ever, and he could be easily considered the best ever. I think I do consider that. And then nowadays he's kind of a shadow of his former self, because he's old and tired for part of it, as part of the reason. But you're like, whatever other reasons there might be, like maybe he has a little bit of that complacency from kind of being so successful kind of early. There's a little bit of that, a little bit of health issues, a little bit of maybe him. Yeah, I think he might be a little bit aware of the industry and how it works, and be kind of tired of that and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I just worry, like, some of those, like, accomplished people, they become like Stephen King and go real left all of a sudden. And it's like, you used to be like a open mind, like a smart.
Yeah. I know, like, what happened with Stephen King? It is like the IQ goes down or something. Like Stephen King I'm like, dude, you sound dumb to me. Like, how does this even work?
I mean, he's rich. He has no reason to, unless he's paid by it. I don't get it, because it's so dumb. Yeah, it's so dumbed down. It's like, also, like, even music I like I just saw the band Cake, which I liked when I was young too. And then I went on their Twitter, and it was all this like retweeting anti-DeSantis stuff.
Yeah, that's stupid.
But then I saw him, and he didn't make any political comments, and I was really glad.
Yeah.
Because I was really I was going to walk out if he did something really annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it because I thought, like, I guess I used to think, oh, if you're a creative guy, you're probably critically thinking all the time. You're like, I don't know, I just don't get how that happens, I guess, but
Yeah, I'm still a little confused by that myself. That
yeah, with Howard
one of
Stern
the
too.
things I do think like I like, and I don't know if this is true, but I think after Stephen King's brain broke or whatever from like maybe it's 2016 that did it, whatever it was, he actually can't write good after that point. And before he could write good, and he was a little bit of a critical thinker, and but there's a point where like yeah, you stop critical thinking, you're not going to write anything that good after that point. But the weird one would be like someone who's like legit like absolute idiot and then they are still making amazing art. I don't know, there might be examples of that, I don't know, but
Yeah, I didn't David Lynch once say something like that was a good speech Trump did or something.
yeah, people shut him down
Yeah.
immediately. Yeah, yeah, he said like it's all good messages come together and people were like shut up, and he did backtrack just a little bit. I'm like, oh dang, sorry David Lynch. But he's still on that critical thinking level though. He can, someone he might not like can say something and he can listen to the words, that kind of stuff. A lot of those people like you can tell who's like a little based. Being based is like what I think is important. I think of it as being short for reality based. So like
Yeah.
Tarantino, David Lynch, a lot of these older guys still got it, didn't lose it.
I mean, I just never would have predicted Bill Maher is the voice, like more of a voice of reason than Stephen King, Howard Stern, especially,
Yeah. Howard Stern's brain broke. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like a little bit sad, or I don't know. Yeah, the Stephen King one does kind of vex me because I'm like, what?
And
Like, did he get cloned and replaced or what?
yeah, I know. He did get in a car accident at some point. I don't know if that's.
Oh yeah, yeah. I read his
And
book
also,
called On Writing, and he talked about that. He got hit by a car or whatever and almost died, but I don't know.
yeah, and some people like Kevin Smith is annoying now. He's not as bad as Stephen King, but and some people I'm like, I wonder if they wouldn't have been canceled if they would have stayed establishment, like Louis C.K. If he never was canceled, would he have just been like Trump's bad and just
Yeah,
an alternate timeline happened where he wasn't canceled and
yeah. You hope he wouldn't be, but you're like worried, or old comedians that weren't around today, like the one that people. I'm like, oh, but it's the one everyone loves. But he's like,
Carlin.
yeah, Carlin. Yeah, yeah. So Carlin's the one where his clips are always floating around even now.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, if he was around, he would have been like, get your vaccine, everyone. Oh,
Yeah, I know. God, everybody uses him on both sides, and same with the book 1984. The left uses it pretending that Trump is somehow
yeah.
Orwellian.
I know. After 2016, they said that 1984 book sales skyrocketed. And I was like, that's so weird. And my friends too, who are the dumb liberal friends or whatever, they were emailing me. They're like, it's 1984. It's happening. You should read it. I just bought it and reread it. I was like, that's so weird that you could go through a whole process of reading a book with that like confirmation bias, because
Yeah.
it's literally the opposite. It's like the left is the authoritarian people.
Yeah, what? God. I mean, yeah, because everyone's so afraid to express their hatred of the right.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Like you get in trouble if you say that. No, it's like the most common, boring thing, really. Yeah. I got to go pretty soon. I can keep chatting
Oh,
a
yeah.
bit, but just letting you know.
Yeah, thanks for keeping it going while I got exited out or whatever happened.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it's been a good discussion, good little chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, do you have a website or do you just
just Twitter and YouTube, and then the current campaign, which is GoFundMe. So those three. I'm at plaster_Harris. That's like an old stupid account I made way back in the day, but that's like my account. And then it's called Narwhal Books on.
You can. I just found out you can change your YouTube username, because I had one too that was not a guy in his room. It was one I made whenever I made my first video ever.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just was able to change it, thank God. But
yeah, I probably will look into that. Right now, the Twitter and the YouTube one are the same, which is kind of nice, but I'll see if I can change them both. And yeah, Twitter is becoming X now, I guess.
yeah, I thought it wasn't loading, and that's why for me.
yeah.
Is your first name is Pear? Is that short for something, or is that?
No, it's a Swedish name, and that's just my name. Yes, Pear.
Yeah, everybody go back his book, and yeah, because that's what we have to do. Well, I mean, I feel like that's the only way our society will be okay, is if more things like Comicsgate happen, like in every. I mean, Daily Wire already started doing comedy specials and movies. Like, I just think that's going to have to keep happening, because.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully the writer strike just ends Hollywood completely, and.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I want like a Phoenix situation. Like,
yeah.
There can be something that comes after, but it's going to be different and better. And even if it's just like back to meritocracy or whatever, but I don't know. It's like, it's a little bit confusing what's happening.
Yeah.
The whole
Well,
situation.
just make a whole Antifa country, and they can all go there.
Yeah.
Autonomous zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thanks for coming on. Yeah, everyone back his book, and yeah, check out his YouTube channel and everything else, and yeah, yeah, thanks for coming on, and yeah, I guess that's it then.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. I'll see you on streams and stuff.
Yeah, we can do it again sometime too. Chat whenever.
Oh yeah.